He's got quite a lengthy bio, but have to cut it down a little bit just for time. But as a fellow of the American College of Epidemiology, Society of Behavioral Medicine, American College of Sports Medicine, American Heart Association, and the National Academy of Kinesiology. Dr. Blair is also a recipient of 3 honorary doctoral degrees from the Free University of Brussels, Lander University, and the University of Bristol in the UK. Dr. Blair is also granted a Merit Award from the National Institutes of Health and is one of few individuals outside the U.S. Public Health Service to be awarded the Surgeon General's Medallion. He's published over 650 papers and chapters in the scientific literature and one of the most highly cited exercise scientists with over 44,000 citations. Much more I could say about Dr. Blair, but we're fortunate to have a great speaker, very knowledgeable about health and exercise with us today, right here in our backyard. And, my case, literally in our backyard, my backyard, because he's my next door neighbor. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Steve Blair.
Thanks, Phil. Have you taken care of that snake that's in your backyard that was trying to get here tonight? You got him?
Well, we got cats.
Oh, okay, good. Well, it's a pleasure to come on. I really know a lot about this group here. I'm really pleased. Why is that, Phil? Because my wife Jane buys a bunch of pecans from me. So you guys, gals, have great pecans. So I'm going to talk about energy balance, obesity, physical activity, and the like. Here, it's customary in the academic world when you give a talk to put up your disclosures. So you can say, well, I can see why he said that. He had a grant from the U.S. Department of Defense, so he must be correct. So those are my disclosures, and here are the topics I propose to address over the next 3 hours. So you see 3. Oh, well, okay. So do we have an epidemic of obesity? Yes. Oh, okay, the first one is finished now, so it'll only be 2 hours, I guess. Do we know how to prevent obesity? Yes, we do. Sit less, walk more, stand more, and walk around the block. And my opinion of you folks has gone down just a little bit, because you had a wonderful lunch, and you could be outside taking a very nice walk on this beautiful day, and here you come and listen to this old codger professor ramble on. So I don't know, but anyway, yeah, I think you're still good people. So here is, I'm going to help you learn how to do this. Detailed instructions here from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. So do you think you can get that? Maybe, you get careful, stand. So if you do need to lean against the wall, that's okay. So sit less and stand more. And then I do think it is a good idea to walk around the block. And I do have these blocks for sale for a mere $100 each. I would be glad to, got a truck outside full of them, so I'm sure you'll all want to buy one. What are the primary causes of the obesity epidemic? Well, we talk a lot about energy balance, and my current big research projects are dealing with energy balance. And at the simple level, which I have to do, I'm not a really knowledgeable physiologist. I mean, you do all remember the laws of thermodynamics. So energy can be created or destroyed in the human body. So the calories in and the calories out, if you take in more than you expend, that energy has to go somewhere. Yeah, okay, where does it go? If you burn more than you take in, then that energy has to come from somewhere, so you can use some of this fat you have stored. Now, there may be some physiologists, physicians in the room. I know it's much more complicated than that, but at the simple level, this is energy balance. So what is causing the obesity epidemic? Is it because people are eating more? Intake has gone up? Is it because energy expenditure has gone down? Is it some combination of the two? And is it balanced, or is it more on one side of the equation or the other? Well, this is the research that we're really focusing on at the moment. Now, what you hear again and again and again in the popular press is that all the world's obesity and essentially all the other world problems, including ISIS, is due to fast foods and sugary drinks, right? It's just awful. You're bombarded with that all the time. So, for example, look at this. A meal for a family of 4. Look at that. McNuggets and Big Macs and fries and Coke. And, isn't that awful? When you could have a nice home-cooked meal. You have some baked chicken, baked potatoes, whole wheat bread, some salad. So, I'm sure you know the answers, but which one of these meals has more calories per person? Is it this one? How many say this one? How many say this one? Some of you are already suspicious of me, I can tell. Well, look at this. Here you go. McDonald's, what is that, 900 calories per person and 37 grams of fat. Isn't that awful? But actually it's fewer calories and less fat than in the home-cooked meal. So don't believe all this nonsense you hear again and again and again in the popular media about these issues. And in fact, if you go to, some of you may be scientists, physicians, if you go to PubMed, I don't think I put this slide in, but if you go to PubMed and search for articles on diet and obesity, physical inactivity and obesity, and there's the same huge difference in numbers in terms of the diet. We're bombarded with that in the world of science, as is the public. Here's an example I'd like to use. Those Aussies down there, my goodness, obesity rates tripled over this 2 or 3 decades, whatever it is. Oh, and by the way, during that same time period, sugar intake went down in Australia. I could show you the same data from the United Kingdom, from the U.S. Well, no, wait a minute. In the U.S., sugar intake did just skyrocket when you were in elementary school, or even before you were born. 20s and 30s, sugar intake really took off. And it's in the last 20, 30 years pretty flat or declining in the U.S. So let's talk a bit about dietary trends, and I've already tipped some of you off. I'm a bit of a crazy guy, but we spend tens of millions of dollars measuring diet in the American population. This is the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey. It's done periodically. Spend huge amounts of money, big representative samples, tens of thousands of people with many different measures, including dietary assessments, 24-hour dietary recalls. So here are the data from those first 2 enhanced periods, and then the 2 after that. Look at that big increase. These are, I can barely see, these are the data for women, but it's very similar for men. Pretty flat those first 2, and then it went up. Well, when this was published in the Morbidity Mortality Weekly Report from CDC, I happened to have a friend, Van, who was visiting us. We were living in Dallas at the time. I said, Van, what do you think about this article on trends in dietary intake? He said, well, you can't call them trends. Oh, why not? Here's the answer. Those first 2 surveys, they did the 24-hour dietary recalls Monday through Friday. Then they did them 7 days a week. And I know this guy drinks more calories on Saturday, Sunday than he does on Wednesday. But more importantly, they discovered that the interviewers doing these surveys just weren't trained enough. So in those first 2 surveys, I would have asked Phil, where'd he go? Well, Phil, what time did you get up? And this is a 24-hour recall. What time did you get up yesterday? And I know this is the fact. It's about 11 o'clock, my usual time. I said, well, did you have any breakfast? He said, yeah. What you had? I had some cornflakes and coffee. But in those first 2 surveys, I said, okay, that's good. That's breakfast. Did you have a snack? Let's go on to lunch. But now, after I've been trained, I think, no, wait a minute. Phil, did you put anything on your cornflakes? Well, a cup of heavy cream and 6 teaspoons of sugar. What about your coffee? So you get the point. The more people are trained to probe, the more calories they find. So that's the main difference in those first 2 and the last 2 surveys. Maybe the 7 days a week, but the interviewers were the training went much more thoroughly. And by the way, this Van, who told me this actually would be Rear Admiral Dr. Van Hubbard, who is the director of the Nutrition Center at our National Institutes of Health. So that's not a guy who's just some crazy exercise guy. This is a big authority. So lots of confusion about the causes of obesity. Here's an example. Science, some of you may know, is one of the world's leading scientific journals. Several years ago, Donald Kennedy, he'd been president of Stanford, he was chairman of the FDA, I think, very prominent scientist, and I think he was the editor of Science at the time. Phil Allison, I think, had been an editor. And so they wrote this editorial on the obesity epidemic. And can you read? Can you read? I don't have to read this slide here, right? You can, okay, so you read it. So why do I put this up? What's wrong with this statement? Well, if Americans are eating 3,800, twice as many as they need, my little granddaughter helped me with this division, they're getting 1,900 extra calories a day. And since it takes, you can see, 7,700 calories to lay down a kilogram of fat, if you're in positive caloric balance, that means the average American is gaining a kilogram, a little over 2 pounds every 4 days. And that would be 90 kilograms a year, or 200 pounds a year. We are gaining some weight, but I don't think it's 200 pounds a year. But this is the kind of nonsense. In science, these guys are both members of the National Academy of Sciences, I'm sure. How can they write such a moronic statement? It's beyond me. So, here's some of the data on Google. I searched a few months ago. Again, inactivity and obesity. See how many? And then, oh my goodness. I first saw the inactivity. Oh, that's nearly 1 million hits. Isn't that good? Yeah, diet, 70 million. PubMed is the official, it's a database managed by the federal government that counts the papers, scientific papers that are published in the United States. And see how many manuscripts on inactivity and obesity, and how many. So there's huge imbalance, as I've been saying, out there in both the scientific world and then for the public about what's causing the obesity epidemic. Well, is it maybe due to declines in energy expenditure? Well, I'm biased, I'm an exercise guy, so I think that's probably that. So, but again, there's a lot of crazies that don't get that. I can't. Oh yeah, this a few years ago I was in England and saw this editorial, British Science, or this news article about the British Science Festival. A top-flight British scientist made these quotes. Do you really think in 1980 British women were eating 980 calories a day, and now they're eating 35? Again, it's crazy. If you carry out this math, I don't think I did it, but the average Brit's gaining even more than the people in the U.S., at 90 kilograms a year. So these people say, as this one I was going to point out, physical activity hasn't changed. There's no change in energy expenditure. So this is all the same over these last decades. Well, if you look at self-reported leisure time physical activity in national surveys, do you walk, swim, play tennis, jog, etc., those numbers have been pretty flat in the United States. But that's only a small proportion of people's daily energy expenditure. On average, it's maybe 10-15% of your total energy expenditure. The biggest percent comes from your resting metabolic rate. Why is that? Elephants need to consume more calories than mice. So if we gain weight, you got to consume more calories to keep your body alive. But there are other domains like occupation. I got to show you this one. Tim Church published a few years ago. Sitting on your rear end job. Oh, probably everybody in this room has one of those. Mining and manufacturing, falling over. These are U.S. Department of Labor statistics over the last 50 years. And then, I am going to brag on myself a little bit. And you know where I grew up. Farm in Kansas, poor farm boy. And I am so smart. And actually back about there, about 1958, I said, I'm getting off this farm. This is too much hard work. And Grandpa said, yeah, Stevie, get yourself an education. No one in my family had ever gone to college. Stevie, get an education. And you could get a job in out of the weather. Oh my God. How could you get any better than that? So anyway, agricultural jobs, down, down, down. Now, I do still know how to do physical labor. Visiting a friend in Finland, I'm going to be back there in June. I love to go to the sauna with the Finns. Then Ilka said, well, Steve, if you want to go to the sauna tonight, we need some wood down in the sauna. So, this farm boy knows how to do that. Saw, chop, split, put them in that wheelbarrow, take them down to the sauna. I know how to do real work, even though I am a professor. So then I got the wood down there, and I thought, well, maybe, is there anything else that needs to be done to get ready for the sauna tonight? So I go look for my supervisor, and here is supervisory work. We've got some of you in this audience, so I know you need to get back and take your nap this afternoon. So anyway, using these U.S. Department of Labor data and giving estimates of energy expenditure in the sedentary, goods-producing agricultural jobs, here is what we reported a few years ago on the decline in occupational energy expenditure in the United States. You might say, well, 140 calories, 124, that doesn't sound like very much. Day after day after day after day. And in fact, the experts in the obesity world say that the obesity epidemic can be explained by a positive caloric balance of 70 to 90 calories a day. This is more than enough. And when we looked over this 50-year period and used the equations from these calculations, it was very, very high correlation with the actual measured weights of American men and women at those NHANES surveys over time. So, does anyone here want to argue with me? Oh no, there's been no decline in occupational energy expenditure over the last 50 years. I mean, if you want to argue, stand up. I'd love to argue. If you want to say, oh no, there's been no change, well, you would have to be a little crazy. No, I don't want to argue with crazy people, I guess. Or what about another domain of energy expenditure? I remember when Grandma got a vacuum cleaner, probably about 1948, down this tiny little town in Kansas. Oh my goodness, Mrs. Blair has a vacuum cleaner. I'd never seen one. I remember when my mother got an electric stove, and we didn't have to haul wood in, and et cetera, et cetera. So household management energy expenditure, cooking, cleaning, child care. Again, we use big national databases on this. And over these last 45 years, you can see the average American woman has had a decline of 1,800 calories a week. And screen time has shot up. I surely no one would be surprised at that. And when we wrote it, we weren't criticizing American women, although we really got blasted by some of my colleagues in the School of Public Health. They were just some of the female colleagues. So you're just saying if American women are fat, lazy slobs, and if they just do more housework, it would solve the problem. We didn't say that. It's just that here's another domain of energy expenditure that has gone down and down and down and down. We've been very good at engineering human energy expenditure out of life compared to the way we evolved 10,000 years ago or even way back when we were all kids. Another domain is transportation. Not many people walk or bike to work or to school. And again, back here somewhere, 1946, 47, I didn't walk or bike to school either. Pat took me to school. He was my pony. I rode him a mile and a half to a country school. And actually riding a horse is you spend a lot more energy than sitting on your rear end in a car. But then another thing about a horse, you get him to the school, put him in the barn there, what do? Give him some hay. And then when you go back out that evening, you head home, what do you find in the barn? Some poop. Well, you got to clean that up and get it out. So it takes more effort than it does to get in my very nice Avalon and just turn the key and so forth. And another example of how we engineered human energy expenditure down and down. So this is the primary cause of the obesity epidemic. How many of you know who James Watt was? Come on, you didn't take social studies or? Have you? Well, let me ask this then. Have you ever heard of steam engines? He's the guy that invented the steam engine 200 or 300 years ago. And we could also blame Henry Ford, Thomas Edison, Bill Gates, who makes the lazy boy recliners? We down and down and down on human energy expenditure. So here's what I postulate has happened. First half of the 20th century, energy expenditure was going down. People were moving off the farm, et cetera, et cetera. But we were in energy balance, and there was no real increase in average weights. After World War II, more technology, more changes in society, we're still in energy balance, but at a lower level. And again, weights of Americans were staying the same. And then, in the last 20 years or so of the 20th century, energy expenditure continued down, as it had for decades, but energy intake didn't match it. And the reason for this is very complicated physiology that I don't begin to understand. Unfortunately, I have colleagues who do. You've got to be at the high enough level of energy balance, what we're now calling energy flux, for most of you to be able to match your intake to your expenditure. Now, there are genetic factors, and people are different. And my Aunt Jean, who's 90-some, she's a true Blair. She's tall and skinny. I'm really a Mendenhall or a King, and not tall and skinny, as you might have detected. And Auntie Jean, as far as I know, never did any exercise in her life, and I never saw her Thanksgiving, Christmas. What, anyone want another piece of pumpkin pie? Oh yes, I'll have it. I never saw her turn down any food, but she's got the right genes, and she still manages to match her intake to her expenditure. I've been struggling ever since I got off that farm and became a sedentary professor, struggling somewhat unsuccessfully to control my weight. It's just really hard. It's harder for some of us than for others. I eat a healthy diet. I take the last 5 years, starting on my 70th birthday, 5 million steps a year. And I've got just another couple of months before my 76th birthday. I'm going to hit it this year. So top that, you young, well, even you old guys. So how can we deal with this epidemic? Well, obviously, I think we need more attention on the physical activity issue as a cause and prevention of obesity than we've been doing. Now here's, again, you're bombarded with, oh, fat, 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 causes everything, diabetes, heart attack, stroke, on and on and on. It's the worst thing that ever happened. Well, actually, much of the research on obesity and health outcomes, I can still find today, this week there will be papers published on obesity and health outcome X, where physical activity is not even mentioned in the article. That's equivalent to publishing an article on obesity and lung cancer and not even mentioning smoking. They don't even mention physical activity, or better still, laboratory measured cardiorespiratory fitness. Now, I've been working the last 35 years or so with this big database, tens of thousands of men and women, where we have laboratory measured fitness, maximal exercise test on a treadmill. And Tim Church, who was working with me at the time, published this. I just love this. These are, whatever the number is, men, all of whom had physician-diagnosed type 2 diabetes. So in this clinical examination where we get these data, of course, their height and weight was measured. You all know what BMI is, body mass index, that was measured, and sorted into normal, overweight, and obese BMI categories. And then those bars are their fitness measured with this maximal exercise test. So the yellow are the unfit ones, the bottom 20%. The pink, or whatever that is the next 40%, and we've called those moderately fit. And then the turquoise are high fit, the top 40%. Now, there aren't a lot of obese guys who are high fit. If you look around this room, you actually, I think, might be able to find one. But anyway, these analyses, here we combine the moderate and high fit. So those guys are at least moderately fit. Now look at their risk of dying of, this is the cardiovascular disease deaths. Look at that compared to the normal weight guys who are unfit. The normal weight guys are more than twice as likely to die during this however many years of follow-up we had with this group. So you're better off, if you have diabetes, you're better off to be obese and at least moderately fit than to be normal weight and unfit. Well, yeah, but this moderate fitness, my God, what do you have to do? Go to the gym 2 times a day and run marathons? No. The U.S. Physical Activity Guidelines are 150 minutes a week of moderate intensity activity such as walking in bouts of 10 minutes or more. So 3 10-minute walks, 5 days a week, you meet that target, and that will put you in the moderately fit category. Or, if you're energetic like this guy, you can run. And then you get that same dose of activity in 75 minutes. I know you're all busy, I just don't have time to exercise. You tell me you can't afford 75 minutes a week of running or 150 minutes a week of walking? Because if you say you're too busy to do that, I'm going to get a search warrant and come to your house and see how many televisions you have in your house. Then I'm going to monitor how many hours of TV you watch a week, and the average American is 4 or 5 hours. I say if Americans would just get up and walk around the couch during commercials, they'd meet 150 minutes a week. And again, in the interest of full disclosure of my biases, I do have a contract from the American carpet manufacturers, hoping people will take my Just look for opportunities to be a bit more active. So when you all get up now and walk out before I finish, okay, I caused it, right? You're going to have to take that walk. So how should we deal with the obesity epidemic? We have to have a better understanding of energy balance, and that's what we're working on. We have to develop interventions once we really learn how much of it is due to eating too much, how much to moving too little, and then develop interventions. And this has to be in many areas. It's not just, okay, sign up and go to the gym. It's public policy. It's educational programs. One of the biggest catastrophes in American education. A couple of years ago, the U.S. National Academy of Sciences published for comment Science Education in the United States. So I have 600-700 pages. I downloaded it, took a look. I go to the find box and I type in behavioral science. 1 nanosecond later, term not found. I'm not opposed to physics and chemistry and biology and math, no. But can anyone in their right mind say there is no place at all in American education to try to help people learn how to manage their behavior? Now, whether it's the physical activity behavior that I'm interested in, eating behavior, or do you floss your teeth every day like your dentist tells you to? Okay, he does. Do you? Well, some of you don't. Well, okay, let's learn how to do that. Balance your checkbook. Oh, be nice to your wife, and you do that regularly. Manage your behavior. And it's not important enough to teach American children about it. What's that? Oh, well, of course, we need to work through clinical medicine. And I think the biggest solution, not the only solution, is to learn how to use modern technology to help people practice healthful lifestyles. How many of you are wearing step counters, Fitbits, et cetera, et cetera? Yeah, that's gaining. We started work on that 25 years ago or so. It's gaining popularity. How many apps are there for your iPhone? Tens of thousands, actually. And some of them deal with managing your health behavior. Let's learn how to use these things to help everybody, whether it's my 7-year-old granddaughter or this old geezer up here at the front table. And then let's test these things. Let's do some research to see which of the interventions work, and then let's implement the successful interventions. Okay, I'm a professor. What do you expect me to say? Let's do research and learn how to do these things better. So, causes of the obesity epidemic, as I mentioned earlier, we are studying this. We've got a big study approaching the end of the third year in which we're measuring intake, expenditure, body composition every 3 months, and we've got a database. And I've said this in meetings around the world when I explain what's in the database. So there's no database like this in the world. And no scientist ever argued with me. So we're getting together a great database. Well, let's develop some good strategies. And this is a wonderful example of a failed strategy. And all of you remember this 40 years ago. And yeah, we do need to help manage the drug problems. But it's been a total failure. Unless, I've just given a couple of lectures in the last month in California. In California, there's been a huge success in the war on drugs in California. If your objective is to build prisons and put people in prison. I mean, that's a main reason why California is going bankrupt. It's the amount of people they have locked up for nonviolent crimes. Most of them drug. Well, is this smart? No, I don't think so. So let's develop a better strategy for dealing with the obesity epidemic. Yeah, of course, what do I put up first? Let's try to get more people meeting these physical activity recommendations. And again, okay, professor, what do you expect me to say? Send more money so we can do more research. Yeah. Even money. Do any of you read the New York Times? Did you see in the last week Newt Gingrich? You remember him? He argued for doubling the budget of the U.S. National Institutes of Health. So this is not some crazy, wild-eyed dream of a socialist professor. Newt Gingrich. So we need to double the amount of money we're spending on medical research. I don't recall whether Newt's ever said anything else I agreed with or not, but I sure support him on this one. So, you go to the NIH website and look at the categories of where they spend their money. These are in billions, or over 5 years. Is this still the last, or whatever it is. Well, look at that money on nutrition and obesity, $2.4 billion last year. So I thought, well, this is great. I wonder how much they're spending on physical activity research. So I searched through these 233 categories.